I was thinking the other day that I might actually go out and purchase a new lens, and I started to think about the process I always go through, and I always seem to ask the same kind of questions internally to myself every time I start this research process. And the first question is obvious. It's always the same thing, and it's, how much does it cost? What is this lens going to set me back? So that's always my very first question. And the second one is always the same too, and that is, how sharp is it? I always think the same thing. How sharp is this potential new lens that I might get? I know there's not sharpness isn't everything. There's a lot of other aspects that go into a good quality lens, but I think for landscape photography, sharpness is definitely on the top of the list. I think most landscape or outdoor photographers, I know I personally am, I'm a sharpness freak. There's really no way to get too sharp of an image, in my opinion. Now, there's ways to over sharpen an image in post, but as far as shooting an image, I don't think I've ever seen an image that was shot too sharp. So that's definitely very, very important to me. And I've always heard about the sweet spot in lenses, and I know what it is. It's where your lens, what aperture your lens is the sharpest at, because it's not the same throughout the entire aperture range of your lens, and it varies for every lens. And I personally spend, and I think most photographers do, the majority of your investment into this craft is in your lenses. It's more expensive than your camera bodies. It's more expensive than anything is your lenses. And I was thinking about it. I was like, wow, lenses are so important to what I do, and it's the largest part of my investment, but I really don't know much about them except, what aperture it goes down to or what the focal range is. So I decided to kind of figure out what the sweet spot is for each one of my lenses. And the cool thing about this exercise, one, I think the whole entire thing took me about 20 minutes. And two, once you do it for each one of your lenses, you never have to do it again, unless, of course, you forget what the sweet spot is. But like I said, it's one of those things that if you have enough light and you have the availability in a specific shoot to shoot in pretty much any aperture, why not shoot where your lens performs the best? So what I did is I took my camera out in the backyard. I did this exercise. I started off with my 70-200. This is the lens I was most curious about to determine exactly where its sharpest aperture was, what that range looked like. I'm going to do it with my other lenses, my 16-35 and my 55mm prime, but that's the lens I did for this video. And the subject that I shot was this old camera for a couple reasons. One, I think it looks pretty cool. And two, I'm not sure if you can see that or not, but there's tiny writing around the lens here. And that's easiest for me to determine sharpness of an image when you zoom all the way in, when I can see letters or, very fine lines. So I decided to use that. Your eyes might be a little bit more refined than mine, and you don't need to use letters, but I would recommend using something with letters, like an eye chart type of thing. But what I did is I took it out to the backyard. I put the old camera on my fence post and threw the 70-200 on my camera, and you can do this for really whatever focal range you want. I did it at 70mm, 135, and 200 to kind of cover the entire range, but you can really do whatever you want to do. So what I did is, I'll jump into Lightroom and show you exactly what I did, but I think just taking the actual images took me about 10 or 15 minutes. It didn't take long. Went upstairs in the house into the office and threw everything in Lightroom. And let's see here. So the images you're looking at now, if you look at the XF data, this is 134mm, so 1mm shy of 135. And what I did is I didn't manually focus, because you really should refocus every time you do change your aperture. So for every image, I just refocused real quick and then took the image over and over and over again. And probably what I was most interested, two things. One, I was interested, of course, to figure out what the sweet spot was. But two is I was really curious about diffraction. And I think a lot of us are pretty familiar with what diffraction is. And when you get into those higher f-stop values, f16 and above, the image sharpness really starts to degrade and your images become much softer. But I was curious exactly, how fuzzy did it get? I never shoot in those apertures, but I was curious. And I was pretty blown away, honestly. So this is f22 right here, and then this is f20 on the right. And I'm going to zoom in to 4:1. And look at how fuzzy, and maybe it's kind of hard to tell right now because we haven't gotten down into the lower f-stop values, because you're looking at two images right now, f22 on the right and f22 on the left and f20 on the right. And both of these images right now are suffering from diffraction. f22 looks like it's almost unusable, but I was pretty amazed by that. And then I just started to go through each one of these images here. So this is f18 on the right now, as you can see up here, and then f16. Once again, now you can tell that f16 is certainly sharper than f22. And as we creep down into the aperture range, you're going to see that sharpness increase. So f14 looks, yeah, see, when you toggle it back and forth, like look at the word lens right here, and I'm just going to kind of go back and forth. It's very subtle, and I'm not sure if you can see it or not, but this is f16, that's f14, so you can really see the overall sharpness increase. And let's go down to f13, that's of course sharper. f11, starting to look good, and look at f11 compared to f22. That's pretty amazing. And then f10 looks good. f9 is starting to get sharper. Now we should be starting to get into that range. And before I started this exercise, just so you know, I was under the impression that the sweet spot of this particular lens was between f8 and f11. I've also always heard kind of a rule of thumb that 2 to 3 stops above wide open is going to be your sweet spot. So going in, I had that mindset going in, and I was a little surprised at what the outcome was. So let's start comparing some of these other images here. So this is f8 on the left compared to f9. So the f8, it looks sharper than f9. Let's go over here. f7 looks good. Okay, now this is f8 and f6.3. Now this is where you really want to start looking closely, because you're going to start to see a little subtle differences. f6.3 and f8 both look good. f7.1 looks good. Now 5.6 is starting to look a little bit softer. f5, yep, and you can tell that we're out of that sweet range now. And I apologize if this is kind of hard to see on YouTube, but if you decide to go through this exercise on your own, you'll definitely be able to see the difference when you're comparing the images on your own computer. But this is f4.5, and if you look at 4.5 compared to 8, you can definitely see a little bit of image degradation there. Let me get to this is 7.1 against 6.3. Let me get to f4 here. So f4 on the left, this is wide open, and f6.3, and you can definitely tell that 6.3 is sharper than 4.0. So I would say for this lens, the sharpest values are 6.3, 7.1, and 8, and probably 9. So I was a little surprised. Like I said a few moments ago, I thought the sweet spot for this lens would be a little bit higher. Now, also keep in mind, a lot of, we're zoomed very far in. Nobody looks at images like this. But like I said earlier, if you have enough light and you can use the sharpest aperture of your lens, why not use it? So for this lens, it is definitely 6.3, 7.1, and f8 are probably the sharpest. And then the higher you go, the less sharp it is. Now I want to compare 6.3 to 22. Now look at f22 on the left compared to 6.3. That's amazing difference. f22 practically looks like it's completely out of focus versus 6.3. So that was very interesting to me too. Like I said, I think we're all very familiar with diffraction, but unless you go through an exercise like this, you're probably not really sure exactly how bad the diffraction really is at those higher f-stop values. And once again, that's going to change a little bit from lens to lens, because every lens is going to be different. Diffraction is going to sit in at different points, and the overall sharpness is going to be completely different in each lens. So I also went through the same exact exercise, zoomed all the way in at 200, and the sweet spot there was a little bit different. It was a little bit higher in the range. It actually included f9 and f10. So, and it didn't go down as low either. So I think the sweet spot at 200 millimeters was about f10 to about f8, f9 range right there. So it's, generally speaking, it looks like it's about a 2 to 3 stop range is the sweetest spot for my 70 to 200 right here. So like I said, In my opinion, a very useful exercise. It was definitely worth the 15 or 20 minutes to determine that. And I'm going to write everything down. I'm going to do this with all my lenses because I know I'll certainly forget what the sweet spot is for each focal length, and I don't want to have to go through the exercise again. So anyway, I thought this video might be helpful or informative to you. If you have any questions, definitely leave me a comment below. I guarantee I'll get back to you. And if you're not subscribed to my channel and you like the content that I'm creating, if you could subscribe, hit the subscribe button below and give me a thumbs up on this video if you enjoyed it. And I appreciate you watching as always, and I will see you all next week. Bye.